possible on our Earth? And what peace really means? These are the questions that the documentary Soldier of Peace wanted to answer.
So I engaged with the Australian director, who's quite a famous Australian war correspondent, and we decided to make a movie. And the first thing we'd do is go into a number of conflict zones in different parts of the world and look at people who had transcended that to try and create peace. And then we'd interview a range of experts on peace who then talk about peace and its positioning in the 21st century.
Steve Killelea is a New Zealand businessman who lives in Australia and travels the world. He is also a philanthropist who donated money to cure thousands of people in African and Asian poor countries. He was deeply saddened by the destruction caused by violence and conflict, but he also saw a glimpse of hope.
What I was finding as I was travelling around the world, I'd go to violent situations and I'd find local people whom had actually transcended the violence and quite often at great personal risk had worked to trying to create peace in those societies. And a lot of the time these stories were untold.
One of the examples he showed in the documentary is how an imam and a priest in Nigeria worked together to end the civil war in their country. They compared their secret texts and found many similarities, then campaigned together throughout the country to call for peace, and they succeeded.
There's an expression which is commonly used called the clash of civilizations, which really is the clash of Christianity and Muslim cultures. So what we decided was to go to one of the hotbeds of this clash and just see if we could find stories which actually transcended. And that's where we came across the Imam and the Preacher, which is a tremendous story of two people whose militias have been fighting each other for a decade, created reconciliation, then brought peace to Kaduna, which is the large city in which they both live.
This shining example for Muslims working for peace is not the only example the documentary showed. It also portrayed Palestinians in a positive manner, featuring Palestinians and Israeli kids learning together in harmony.
What we were interested in doing there was finding something which talked about what would happen if you could actually educate the two groups together. And that's how we came across that one.
Steve thought that a documentary is not enough, so he developed in 2006 what is now known as the Global Peace Index.
I was travelling through Africa looking at some of the developmental aid projects we do there, and I was in these war zones or near post-war zones, and I started to wonder what was the opposite like? What were the most peaceful countries in the world, and could we learn anything from them which we could bring into the projects we were doing in Africa? I did some searches on the internet, couldn't find anything. I asked some friends who run a peace and conflict study centres, and they didn't know of anything either. So that's how the idea of the Global Peace Index was born. And that's the first study ever to rank the nations of the world by their peacefulness.
Steve believes education is a major key to advance peace in the world.
If you went through any of the major universities in the world today, you won't find a course on the literature of peace in any of the literature departments. Yet there are profound works on peace. Similarly, if you go into any of the economics faculties, you won't find a course on peace economics or the economics of peace. Yet studies we've done illustrate that 80% of business leaders believe that their markets actually increase as you increase peacefulness and that their cost structures decrease.
After 3 years of rating the peacefulness of 144 nations, the Alliance for Peace Building and the Fulbright Center held the first ever symposium for the most peaceful nations.
The major challenges facing humanity today are global, and they particularly revolve around sustainability. Climate change, ever-decreasing biodiversity, full use of the fresh water on the planet, and underpinning all of them overpopulation. And what I realised, unless we had a world which was basically peaceful, would never get the levels of cooperation, trust or inclusiveness to solve these issues, let alone empower the international bodies to create the policies and the governance. Therefore, what I realised, peace was a prerequisite for the survival of society as we know it in the 21st century.
American media did not show up to cover the symposium. However, the participants of this event believe that it will be a major marker in history in the future. For Bridges, this is Aziz Fahmi in Washington, USA.